Greetings, Eric Bakker from New Zealand. Thanks for catching up with me again. I've got another video, a reply here to a question. A question from a man called Mr. Paul McNab from Sydney, Australia. So Paul's asking me, Eric, I've had a stool sample test back. The finding says abnormal amounts of microscopic yeast. What does this mean? What does it mean if there are no other disbiotic flora or bacteria found, and if microscopic yeast is still present? Well, Paul, a lot of people, healthy people, have got microscopic amounts of yeast in their gut. All right, it's at least 1 in 4. 1 in 3, 1 in 4 have got, yeast in the digestive system by default. It's normally occurring microorganism in most people's gut. People have got hundreds of types of bacteria living in their gut, and also hundreds of types of yeast living in their gut. Doctors' data labs who you've done your test through, they check for over 600 types of yeasts. So what does it mean if there are findings of abnormal amounts of microscopic yeast? It means that you've probably got large amounts of dead yeast in the stool. Now here's the trick. Look at the stool test. This is why I recommend a 3-time sample, so 3 samples on 3 concurrent days. Look on the second page of the report and then have a look now at the microscopy. So each stool sample is independently checked. Now you can actually see if you've got many, few or moderate amounts of yeast in a particular sample. So if you've got many yeast in each sample, then go back to the front page and have a look at the yeast culture to see if there's live yeast. So if you've actually got live culturable yeast in the stool sample and lots of dead yeast, you've got a problem, especially if it's compounded with a lack of beneficial bacteria and an overgrowth of disbiotic or bad bacteria, or normal bacteria turned bad because of high amounts. So you've got to get a feel for the whole picture of the stool test. There's no point just looking at one particular thing and then freaking out or thinking it's a problem without taking all of the information into account. But abnormal amounts of microscopic yeast is not good if they're in all 3 samples. It can mean that you've got quite a big yeast problem there. Even though the yeast is dying internally, it still means there is a lot of yeast present. However, if you have got large amounts of abnormal amounts of yeast that's dead, and you've got high levels of beneficial bacteria, that offsets the problem. But if you've got low levels of good bacteria or nil growth, good bacteria that they can't culture because the quantities are so low, if you've got that level plus high amounts of microscopic yeast, then you've most likely got a big problem. But further markers in the stool test report will actually expand on that and show you the severity of the problem, whether it's a major problem or a minor problem. So my recommendation is not to get carried away with one marker, but to look at the totality of markers in the test before you start freaking out, about what these markers basically are. So for some very healthy people I've seen, there's no problem having a large amount of dead yeast in a stool sample, particularly if the balance of the report is good and the person is asymptomatic, meaning they've got no symptoms. So that's what it means. I hope you, understand basically what I'm on about there, Paul, but I wouldn't worry too much about this one particular finding. Thanks for the question.